Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really potent idea, maybe one of the most demanding leadership philosophies out there, radical accountability.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about, basic management signing off on things.
No, this is deeper. It's about a mindset where a leader really takes ownership for, well, everything in their world.
Everything, the wins, the failures.
And maybe most importantly, the culture that allowed those failures to happen in the first place.
Exactly. And when accountability stops being just like an item on performance review and becomes this radical all-in principle, it changes everything. It actually stops being a burden and, starts driving performance.
So for this deep dive, we've pulled together some really interesting sources, haven't we?
We have. It's quite a mix. We're looking at lessons forged in combat from former Navy SEALs like Jocko, Willink, and Leif Babin.
Right, the extreme ownership guys.
Them, yes. But also weaving in wisdom from, ancient philosophy, Cicero, Xenophon. And then contrasting that with insights from modern creative powerhouses, think Pixar, Google.
That's a broad spectrum. So what's the mission here? What do we want you, the listener, to take away?
Well, the goal is really to distill the core principles: ownership, decisive action, and that crucial element of cultural candor.
Things that allow these high-stakes teams to win consistently, even when everything seems stacked against them.
Exactly. How do they do it?
Okay, so let's start where this modern idea really gained traction: the battlefield.
Right. Willink and Babin. They developed this philosophy, this extreme ownership, while serving as SEAL officers in Ramadi, Iraq.
Not exactly a classroom setting.
Definitely not. These weren't theoretical exercises.
Yeah.
They learned through, intense, often brutal experiences during the war. Small mistakes could have lethal consequences.
And the context they describe is just relentless. Constant violence, the risk of being overrun.
Complacency wasn't just bad form, it was potentially fatal.
Yeah. And they noticed something critical about the teams that succeeded, didn't they?
They did. The high-performing teams, the winning teams, they all shared this refusal to blame outside factors. No excuses.
So if something went wrong, the leader had to own it, even if it wasn't directly their action.
Yes, completely. Regardless of the immediate cause. That was the key insight. The natural human instinct is to make excuses, right? It was bad intel, faulty gear, the weather.
You can't blame something else.
But they saw that as the real danger. Because if the leader forces themselves to say, this failure is mine, even if a subordinate messed up, it immediately empowers them. It unlocks their ability to see the systemic issue and fix it.
Yeah.
If it's your fault, you can change something.
But if it's the weather's fault...
You're powerless.
Yeah.
Just a victim of circumstance. Ownership equals control.
Okay, so you accept this total ownership. Then what? The environment is still chaotic. The enemy is still adapting.
Right, and that leads directly to the next piece. The absolute necessity of decisive action, even when you're facing deep uncertainty. Hesitation becomes just as dangerous as a bad decision.
This reminds me of Robert Greenleaf's work on servant leadership. He talked about the terrible dilemma of the hesitant decision maker.
That's a great connection, because it taps into something really fundamental about how we operate. We want certainty before we commit.
Of course, feels safer.
But Greenleaf points out the hard truth. In the real world, in operations, if you're waiting for 100% of the information,
it's never coming.
It never comes. And the delay itself introduces new risks.
How so? It feels counterintuitive, doesn't it? More data should mean less risk.
You'd think so. But Greenleaf argues, and battlefield experience confirms, that waiting too long is often more dangerous.
Oh, okay.
Because the situation changes. While you're waiting, the enemy moves, the market shifts, the opportunity disappears, the moment is lost.
And now you're facing a different problem, maybe a worse one, and you have to start your analysis all over again.
Precisely. You've compounded the risk through delay. Speed, or maybe timeliness, is actually part of the quality of the decision itself.
And the SEAL perspective just slams this point home, right? In combat, there's no perfect solution waiting to be found.
Ever. The intel picture is always foggy, incomplete. There's always friction, waiting for perfect clarity. That's how you get overrun.
So leaders have to get comfortable with that uncertainty.
They must. Make the call based on the best info you have, maybe 60, 70, 80%. And then, crucially, be ready to adjust immediately. The moment new information comes in, you pivot, you own the initial decision, and you own the adjustment.
Intelligence gathering is still vital, but it serves the decision. It doesn't paralyze it.
Exactly. It fuels action, not analysis paralysis.
This issue of uncertainty, it's not just about battlefield fog, is it? It goes right down to how we even interpret data.
Hmm.
I'm thinking of Nassim Taleb here.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Anti-fragile. Taleb points out how even the experts, the statisticians, consistently underestimate randomness. They build elegant models,
That look great on paper.
but completely miss the unpredictable real-world factors they didn't account for. There's a failure of accountability in the modeling itself.
And this leads to major misinterpretations, right? Especially with causation.
Huge ones. Taleb uses these really stark examples of how regression analysis, looking for links between variables, can go completely wrong, especially when two things are jointly responsible for an effect.
It's like the whole fat-free craze.
Yeah.
That dominated for decades.
It did, and it was based on essentially a statistical blunder. The analysis showed people with heart problems ate a lot of fat.
So, conclusion, fat is bad.
Right. Cut out the fat. But they missed the crucial detail. These people often ate high fat along with high processed carbs.
So it wasn't just A causing B, it was A and C causing B, but only A got the blame.
Exactly. The analysts, or maybe the communicators of the analysis, failed to own the complexity. They attributed the problem solely to fat, ignoring the joint role of carbs.
And the public health message, the fat-free everything, was built on that flawed premise, a massive nutritional detour based on incomplete statistical ownership.
Decades of it. And he points to the salt and blood pressure link, too.
Another one we hear all the time.
Yeah. The great statistician David Friedman showed pretty convincingly that for most people, that strong link just isn't there in the data.
Really?
It might hold true for a specific subset, maybe severely hypertensive individuals, but it's likely the exception, not the rule.
So the takeaway for a leader isn't just get good data.
No, it's own the limitations of your data. Even when you think you have solid numbers, you have to account for the possibility that your model is biased, incomplete, or misinterpreting joint causes. You have to be accountable for the fallibility of your information.
Okay, so information is incomplete, data can be misleading. What's left?
Action, decisiveness, momentum. Which brings us back to military thinking, like Clausewitz on Small Wars.
What was his take?
When you're on the march and you hit an obstacle, you don't just stop and wait for perfect intel. You don't turn back too soon.
You find another way.
Immediately. Back roads, detours, maybe even a quick, unexpected attack on a smaller enemy force to clear the way or regain momentum. Because the main goal of the march is simple. Advance.
Keep moving forward.
The leader's job is to maintain that forward momentum, even if it means changing the plan entirely on the fly. Yeah. And owning that new plan, that new route.
This constant need for forward motion, for action. It needs a moral compass, too, doesn't it? It can't just be action for action's sake. Who are you acting for?
Absolutely. And that's where the ancients, like Cicero, provide that ethical foundation for total ownership. He laid down this principle for running a state that feels incredibly relevant right now.
What was it?
He insisted that the state, the administration, must be run for the benefit of the people being governed.
The ones entrusted to the leader's care.
Yes, not for the private gain or interests of the administrators themselves. It's not just a nice idea. He saw it as structurally necessary for stability.
That really is servant leadership, but articulated centuries ago.
Really?
The leader serves the system, not the other way around.
And he warns explicitly against playing favorites, partiality, caring only for one group, the rich, the poor, one faction or another.
Why is that so dangerous?
Because, Cicero says, it inevitably leads to sedition and discord. It tears the state apart. A leader taking total ownership has to care for the whole system, the entire body politic. No exceptions.
And who counts as part of that body politic? Aristotle touched on this too, didn't he? Questioning the boundaries.
He did. When discussing constitutions, he sort of assumes they're aimed mainly at the native inhabitants. But then he asks this really sharp ethical question. Why should where you were born, your nationality, stop someone virtuous from being a citizen?
If they have the qualities, why should borders exclude them?
It challenges the leader to define very clearly the scope of their responsibility. Who are you truly accountable for? Just shareholders? Or employees, suppliers, the community too? Radical accountability demands you to find that whole you serve.
Okay, let's bring this down from the level of statecraft and philosophy to, say, a creative company. What happens when this kind of ownership thinking, or lack of it, hits the real world, even after massive success? I'm thinking of Pixar after Toy Story.
Ah, yes. A fascinating case study in the dangers of success. The producer involved actually described feeling this hollow, lost feeling after they'd achieved this monumental goal.
That sounds completely backward. They'd won, changed animation forever, made fortunes.
Right. But the sheer effort of hitting that one massive target had masked a deeper issue. What next? What was the internal purpose beyond just shipping that first film? The success created a kind of structural void.
And that void, that sort of success hangover, led them into trouble with Toy Story 2.
Directly. They made faulty assumptions. They thought, okay, the first one was brutally hard, but the sequel will be easier.
Why? Because the tech was there, the characters were known.
Exactly. Experienced crew, established looks, story outline ready. They figured they could just hand it off to a less experienced team and, replicate the magic without the same struggle.
The classic, we climbed that mountain, the next one must be smaller trap. Overconfidence from victory.
Totally. And signs of trouble appeared early. The new directors kept asking for more time with John Lasseter, indicating they weren't confident. The team wasn't gelling.
They were taking shortcuts.
Compromises, settling for good enough because the deadline was tight. The leadership, even though they knew about the risks of delegating creativity, they still missed how bad it was getting. Until Lasseter finally cleared his schedule, sat down, watched the reels a year into production, and delivered the verdict. It's a disaster.
Wow, a year's work.
Essentially down the drain. The story was weak, derivative, no emotional core, no tension. He saw it immediately. The leader recounting this admits, despite all his focus on paying attention, he'd completely missed something huge.
So even when you think you're being vigilant, you can miss it.
Vigilance isn't enough. You need cultural systems that force bad news upward fast. In this case, success actually hid the flaw. They delegated creative ownership to a team that wasn't ready. They hadn't owned the readiness assessment properly.
This brings us right back to the individual, doesn't it? The foundation. Covey's principle. Private victory precedes public victory.
The absolute bedrock. Covey argues you can't have good relationships or public success and public victory without self-mastery first. Self-discipline, integrity.
Without that, it's all just surface level, personality tricks.
Exactly. Not genuine character. And to get that private victory, that self-mastery, he says you need to center your life on correct principles.
Not on things like money or spouse or pleasure or even work.
Right, because those things fluctuate. Principles don't. They provide a stable foundation.
How does that foundation translate into security, guidance, wisdom, power, the things Covey talks about?
Okay, so security comes because your worth isn't tied to external factors. It's inherent principle-based. Guidance comes from having an internal compass that isn't swayed by pressure or trends.
Makes sense.
Wisdom, he says, comes from seeing things as they really are, having correct maps based on timeless truths. And power is the power of being proactive, not reactive, not limited by what others do or say. Your actions stem from your principles.
So being principle-centered builds character, and that character becomes the driving force, which links perfectly to Emerson.
Emerson's view of character as the conscience of society. Powerful stuff.
He says men of character stand like a transparent object, letting the truth shine through.
Yes, and crucially, Emerson says the hero understands that the event is secondary. It must follow him.
The event follows the character, not the other way around. That's radical accountability personified.
It really is. You own your internal space so completely that it dictates external reality. People without that character, Emerson says, are always waiting for external events, always reacting to profit or loss.
While the person of character knows that prosperity or failure belongs to a certain mindset.
Right. And no change of external circumstances can fix an internal defect of character. You have to address the character first.
Okay, we've established the individual foundation, the private victory, the character. But how do you get that to work across a huge organization? Thousands of people, different departments, silos. How did the military scale this?
Well, they had to fundamentally change their structure, and they had to do it during a war, which is incredible.
Change from what to what?
Their traditional structure, the familiar org chart with lines and boxes, was built for efficiency, great for predictable, large-scale fights.
But the enemy they faced in Iraq, Al-Qaeda, wasn't predictable or large scale in the same way.
Exactly. AQI was all about adaptability. They operated like a network, flexible, decentralized, able to exploit every gap in the rigid U.S. military structure.
So the U.S. structure was optimizing for the wrong thing. Efficient at old tasks, but not adaptable to the new threat.
Precisely. The goal couldn't just be efficiency anymore. It had to be adaptability, speed, shared awareness across the whole force. That's where the team of teams idea came from.
Because you couldn't just replicate a small SEAL team's dynamic across thousands of people.
Impossible. The scale was too vast. SEALs, Army SF, CIA, conventional forces. So the innovation wasn't trying to make one giant team.
It was.
It was making the relationships between the teams, between the silos, function with the same level of trust, common purpose, and shared understanding that you find within a single elite team.
How'd they achieve that? Seems like a huge cultural shift.
Massive communication and representation, embedding liaison officers everywhere, constant video conferences, breaking down information hoarding, shifting the focus from internal silo efficiency to external network adaptability.
That level of communication, that trust. It sounds a lot like the culture Pixar aims for with its brain trust meetings.
Yeah, very similar principles, yes. The brand trust is legendary for its effectiveness, but it relies on specific ingredients.
Sure.
Frank talk, spirited debate, but also, crucially, laughter and love, meaning deep respect among the participants, and the absolute core rule. The meeting is only about finding the truth of the film's problems.
Not about winning an argument or proving someone wrong.
Never. Ego has to be checked at the door. Candor must trump hierarchy. It's about excavating the problems to help the director make the film better.
How do they make it safe, though, so the director doesn't just feel attacked?
Key rules. 1, critique the film, not the filmmaker. 2, the feedback is not mandatory. The director retains final cut, final ownership.
So the brain trust offers insights, identifies problems, but doesn't dictate solutions.
Exactly. It empowers the director with truth, trusting them to use it wisely. That builds psychological safety.
And the ultimate example of prioritizing that candor involves Steve Jobs, right?
It did. When Jobs came back to Pixar, he actually agreed not to attend brain trust meetings.
He stayed away. Voluntarily.
Yes, it was a mutual agreement. They all recognized that his sheer presence, his authority, would inevitably stifle honest feedback, even if he didn't intend it to.
Wow. He valued the candid process more than his own input in that specific setting.
Speaks volumes about understanding how to cultivate real honesty.
But candor isn't just peer-to-peer or top-down avoidance. It's also about listening up from the organization, isn't it?
Absolutely, and Pixar demonstrated this with their Notes Day. Leadership realized they had internal problems they couldn't even see.
So what did they do?
Called an all-hands meeting and basically said, look, our process has issues, and we think you, the employees, are the only ones who truly know how to fix them. That's radical ownership of a leadership blind spot.
How did they handle the flood of feedback? Must have been overwhelming.
It was a huge undertaking. One team, led by Tom Porter, had to sift through something like 4,000 emails, 1,000 distinct ideas.
And condense that into usable themes.
Into concrete discussion topics. And the results proved the premise. The people doing the work, experiencing the friction points daily, knew exactly what needed fixing. Software workflows, resource sharing, communication gaps.
It proved that distributed ownership works. Accountability needs to flow both ways.
Definitely. And it's such a stark contrast to the old way of doing things, like the feedback system Pixar found when they merged with Disney Animation.
What was that like?
At Disney, then, directors got multiple sets of mandatory notes from development execs, the studio head, maybe even the CEO.
Mandatory, like you had to implement them.
Often delivered as checklists, and frequently from people who'd never actually made an animated film. These notes, often conflicted, were bureaucratic.
And stifled creativity, I imagine.
Led to compromised, inferior films.
Yeah.
So Pixar got rid of mandatory notes immediately. It undermined the director's ownership, the very principle they valued.
When leaders don't distribute ownership like that, when they hoard decisions, it doesn't just hurt creativity, it grinds things to a halt. This sounds like the diminisher leader from the multipliers research.
Exactly. The diminisher, often very smart themselves, thinks they need to make all the key calls.
So what happens to their team?
They create idle cycles. Intelligent, capable people just waiting for the boss to approve the next step, waiting for the decision.
Instead of being unleashed to act.
Right. They get relegated to easy sailing, as the research puts it, when they could be operating at high speed. Their intelligence is neutralized. Accountability gets bottlenecked at the top, killing organizational speed and initiative. Radical accountability means empowering others.
Okay, so empowering teams, decentralizing decisions. That seems key. But where does the ultimate authority lie, especially in things like war or governing a nation? This brings up a classic tension.
It does. between operational autonomy and central control. Sun Tzu was very clear on this, wasn't he?
What was his take on interference from above?
He stated it bluntly. He will win who has military capacity and is not interfered with by the sovereign.
A warning based on history.
Absolutely. Military history is full of disasters caused by distant political leaders meddling in battlefield decisions they don't understand. The general on the ground needs autonomy because they own the outcome there.
So for Sun Tzu, the operational leader needs supreme authority in their domain.
In the field, yes. Now, contrast that sharply with someone like Thomas Hobbes.
Leviathan, he had a very different view on central power.
Completely opposite in a way. Hobbes argued for absolute centralization of power in the sovereign. Why? To prevent the chaos and civil war he believed would result from divided authority.
So the sovereign is the ultimate authority on everything. Military, law, even religion.
Yes. The supreme pastor, he called it. All authority flows from the top to maintain order. This obviously removes that operational autonomy Sun Tzu argued for.
So two radical forms of accountability. One demanding decentralized ownership for tactical success, the other demanding centralized ownership for societal stability.
Exactly. Different layers, different perceived threats.
Can we connect this idea of sovereignty and ultimate ownership to a more personal, maybe even spiritual level? If you take radical ownership of everything, including your internal state, what does ultimate freedom look like?
That's a fascinating path. The Bhagavad Gita offers a perspective here. It talks about acting in Kvitz consciousness, meaning someone acts, uses their body and senses, but is always aware of their deeper spiritual connection and duty. Their actions are performed as service, detached from personal ego or gain.
So they act, they take responsibility for the action.
But they are internally free because their sense of self isn't tied solely to the material outcome. Their ultimate responsibility is to that higher principle or truth.
That sounds like profound detachment. Owning the effort, but not letting the result control your inner state.
That's a perfect way to put it. And it resonates strongly with the Tao Te Ching. Lao Tzu talks about the mysteries of power.
What are those?
The leader who achieves deep sameness, this state of radical detachment from ego, results, praise, blame, they become uncontrollable by external forces.
Immune to manipulation.
Can't be swayed by love or rejection, profit or loss, fame or humiliation. When you reach that level of internal sovereignty, the Tao says, then you have honor under heaven.
So the ultimate ownership is maybe owning your actions while achieving complete internal freedom from the external noise and consequences.
A powerful synthesis, yes. Taking responsibility outwardly, remaining free inwardly.
Wow. We've covered an incredible range here. From a SEAL officer owning a tactical failure in Ramadi,
to a Taoist sage finding freedom through non-attachment. It's quite the journey.
But the core thread, this extreme ownership, feels very practical.
It is. The key takeaways are clear. Leaders must act decisively under uncertainty. Waiting is often the bigger risk.
Morally, you have to follow Cicero. Operate for the benefit of those you lead, not yourself.
And structurally, you need that culture of candor, like the brain trust. Abolish systems that force compliance over truth, empower your people, otherwise you're just creating bottlenecks and hiding problems.
It really does seem to circle back to individual character, Emerson's idea again. Prosperity belongs to a certain mind. The event follows the hero.
And that's the challenge for you, listening right now. Emerson's point is provocative. If you're waiting for something external to change your circumstances.
Waiting for the market, waiting for an apology, waiting for recognition.
Ask yourself, is there an internal shift required first? Are you waiting for an event to fix something that actually needs a change in your own character, your own level of ownership?
Where are you being a spectator when you should be the actor?
Where are you waiting for the event when maybe, just maybe, the event should be following you?
So the final thought is, identify one area, just one, where you're letting external circumstances lead. And make a commitment today to shift. To let your character, your ownership, lead the event instead.
Take that first step towards becoming that self-sufficing, dauntless actor.
Thank you for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.